Do you think you are shrinking? Well, if so, you may be developing osteopenia or osteoporosis. Experts estimate that 40 to 50 million Americans are either living with osteopenia or osteoporosis. And that number should be staggering to you because the number of Americans living with some form of dementia is closer to 7 million. So tune in for today's episode where I'm talking about bone health because I don't want this silent disease to sneak up on you. And at the end, I'll share some of the resources that I've found helpful as I've learned more about the current science for keeping our bones healthy. Welcome to This is Getting Old, moving towards an age-friendly world. I'm Dr. Melissa Batchelor, and I am a nurse and a nurse practitioner with over 25 years of experience caring for older adults and their families. And before we dive into today's topic, I wanted to share a few of the different ways that you can connect with me. You can go to my website, melissabphd.com, and sign up to be an HYSU Insider for free. There you will find all of the downloadable handouts that I've developed in one place. And if you become an HYSU MVP member, you'll also have access to a digital hub of videos, courses, and resources that I've organized by subtopics, which makes it even easier for you to find the information that you're looking for. So if you've listened to one of my episodes and you're wondering if I have more content on that topic, it's super easy to find it as an HYSU MVP member. I also host a monthly live webinar with my MVP members. You can also become a member on YouTube. And depending on the level of membership, you either get early access to my weekly episodes, you can join me for a monthly live Q&A webinar, or you can tune in weekly for a live stream on Tuesdays at 5. So now let's dive into what is osteopenia and osteoporosis. Well, osteopenia is a condition where your bones are weaker than normal, but they're not weak enough to be classified as osteoporosis. So you can think of it as a midpoint between healthy bones and osteoporosis. And experts, again, estimate that 40 million Americans have osteopenia and more than 50 million people are living with osteoporosis. So that's 1 in 3 adults over the age of 50 have some degree of bone loss. And it's estimated that half of these people are assigned female sex at birth, but 1 in 4 people assigned as male at birth actually have osteoporosis. So this is typically thought of as a disease that impacts women, but it impacts quite a few men as well. So here's just a simple way to break it down to help you understand. You have healthy bone. And when your bones are in a healthy state, they're dense and strong, and they're a lot like a sturdy sponge. Then you advance to osteopenia. And when you have osteopenia, your bones lose some of their density and strength, but they're still relatively strong, but they're not as strong as they should be. And then osteoporosis is when the bones become very weak and brittle, and that makes them a lot more likely to break if you were to fall. And I actually became interested in these two conditions after I fell and broke my wrist about 2 years ago, which is like the number one thing. Anytime somebody falls after the age of 50 and breaks a wrist, the first thing is like, okay, what's going on with their bones? As I have kind of gone through the trying to figure out what has happened and been through some different testing, I remember that I was told about 10 to 12 years ago that I had a vitamin D deficiency, which a lot of people have because we're not out in the sun as much. I was just told to start a multivitamin. And I did that. And a couple of months later, I went back and I asked that provider if they would recheck my vitamin D level to make sure that it had come up. And I was told that they don't recheck vitamin D levels. And I was like, well, then how do you know that this multivitamin is working? Anyways, I let that go. Probably got busy and forgot about it. But at that same time, I was also told that my thyroid level, meaning my TSH, which is your thyroid stimulating hormone level, was borderline high, which meant that I was bordering on having hypothyroidism. Well, that also runs in my family, but that same provider chose to not do any further testing, just said, I'll see you in a year. And then I moved and yada, yada. So let's fast forward now to 2 years ago after I broke my wrist, and my provider this time, because of my age and the wrist fracture, sent me to get my DEXA scan, and it showed a T-score of negative 1.5, which means I have osteopenia. And I was really, really upset because all she told me to do was take my calcium and vitamin D. I was like, and come back in 2 years for a repeat DEXA. I was like, I've been doing that. I've been taking the multivitamin. I've been monitoring my calcium because I've known since my 20s that this is something that women are at a higher risk for. And so I don't think those things are working. So that advice made me mad. And but I'm going to pause that story there. And I'll tell you more about this as we go through this episode. But the short version is I've now found a provider with expertise in integrative medicine, and he's uncovered what's probably been the underlying issue that traditional medicine did not look for. And I don't want this to happen to you. So why do conditions like osteopenia and osteoporosis even happen? Well, part of it is a normal part of aging. Your body breaks down old bone faster than it builds new bone. So if your bone density is lower than average, it can progress to osteopenia and then on to osteoporosis. So some of the factors that can contribute to this are age. Most people lose some bone density as they age. Our bones are most dense around age 25. And then this process where the bone's breaking down faster than the body rebuilds it happens around the age of 35. And this still isn't a problem unless it reaches a level of osteopenia. It can happen because of hormonal changes, especially in women. The decrease in estrogen levels after menopause can accelerate bone loss. So that's 2 for me. Diet, not getting enough calcium and vitamin D in our diets can weaken bones. And I thought I was eating a pretty healthy diet. Lifestyle is another factor. So if you're not exercising, if you're smoking or having more than 2 alcoholic drinks per day, all of those things can contribute to bone loss. And I have been very vigilant about making sure I have my 10,000 steps a day. And I will tell you later what's probably the more important exercise to be doing. You need to have physical activity and movement, but there's something that we should be doing to protect our bones. And then the last risk factor or issue that feeds into this are medical conditions and medications. So there are some health issues and long-term use of certain medications that affect bone health. So the health issues include hyperthyroidism, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, malnutrition, vitamin D deficiency, hormonal imbalances like Cushing syndrome, anorexia, and other eating disorders, and any autoimmune disease like rheumatoid arthritis or Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is a form of hypothyroidism, but it has an autoimmune component to it. Medications include diuretics, corticosteroids, being on either of those long-term, medications used to treat seizures. That was also a new one for me. A new risk factor for me to learn about. Hormone therapy for cancer, anticoagulants, and this one surprised me as well, proton pump inhibitors, which are used to treat acid reflux. And proton pump inhibitors, a lot of them are available over the counter now. So if you've been taking those long term, that also is going to increase your risk for developing osteopenia or osteoporosis. So what are the symptoms of osteopenia? Like, how would you know if this was a problem for you? Well, the unfortunate part is osteopenia doesn't usually have any symptoms, and it's often discovered after a routine bone density test, or there's a fracture that leads someone to do the bone density test for you. But a bone density test is also known as a DEXA scan, and this test measures how dense or strong your bones are. And if the test shows that your bones are less dense than normal, but not severely so. So again, it's that T-score. There's a certain range where osteopenia then dips into osteoporosis. And the reason it's important to know if you have osteopenia is because you're at a higher risk for developing osteoporosis. So like you have to there has to be an intervention, pretty aggressive intervention, or your bone loss is going to continue to progress. And I know back in nursing school and nurse practitioner school, other than taking calcium and telling people to do weight-bearing exercises, there was really no one that kind of said, hey, you can actually reverse this and intervene at earlier stages and restore your bone health. So, but I'm going to tell you what I've learned just in the past couple of months. So there is hope and good news. So the symptoms of osteoporosis, though, both of these are referred to as silent diseases because they don't typically have a symptom until a bone is broken. Typically with osteoporosis is where you would see the bone fractures, but obviously you can find them in osteopenia. So some signs that might indicate osteoporosis would be fractures, especially in your hip, spine, or your wrist, that often occur just from a minor fall. So a trip, can trip you up. And so this is listed in osteoporosis, symptom fracture. But like I said, anytime you're over the age of 50, male or female, and you fall and break a bone, you should probably talk to your provider about getting a DEXA scan. So in some regards, I'm glad that I did fall and break my wrist, because otherwise I would have no idea that I have osteopenia, because nobody probably would have tested me for a DEXA scan until I was 65. And then by that time, I probably would have osteoporosis. Another indication is loss of height. So over time, osteoporosis can cause the vertebrae in your spine to collapse. This is what leads to the loss of height. So if you hear someone joking around about shrinking, or you think that you are, if you've lost at least an inch of height when you go in for your annual physical, you probably need to bring that to your provider's attention and ask to get a DEXA scan so that you can find out what's going on with your bones. And then the last two symptoms are back pain. And so this could be caused by a fracture or a collapsed vertebrae. And then stooped posture. I don't think that we would typically see this until very advanced osteoporosis, but that's known as kyphosis, where the person, kind of their shoulders are more rounded, their back is rounded, and they can't actually stand up straight. So anybody with stooped posture probably needs to have a DEXA scan. So how are osteopenia and osteoporosis diagnosed? Well, again, the biggest way is through a bone density test or a DEXA scan. Most people need to get their bone density checked every few years after the age of 50, but especially if you're perimenopausal or postmenopausal. So age, and for females, where you are in the menopause trajectory, that's another indication you need to go get a bone density. And what these tests will do is they're going to give you a T-score, and the T-score compares your bone density to the bone density of a healthy young adult. So if you have a T-score between a 0.1 and a 0.2.5, that indicates osteopenia. Like I said, I'm a negative 0.15, so at least I'm on the higher end I'm closer to having normal bone than being all the way down at 2.5. But a T-score of negative 2.5 or lower is going to indicate osteoporosis. The second way is through medical history and physical exam. So if your doctor's taking your medical history and he's asking you about exercise, any changes in your height, any of the other risk factors we talked about for bone loss, that should lead them to think about ordering a DEXA scan for you. Plus, if you've had a history of fractures and loss of height. Blood and urine tests can also identify underlying conditions that might contribute to bone loss, such as hormonal imbalances, which your thyroid is a hormonal imbalance, or calcium deficiencies or vitamin D deficiency. So if you've been told you have a vitamin D deficiency, that is something else that you need to follow up on and make sure that you're getting adequate vitamin D to prevent further bone loss. So how do we treat osteopenia and osteoporosis? Well, the biggest thing that I recommend is to find a professional with expertise in integrative or functional medicine, or to work with a traditional provider like your primary care provider, an endocrinologist, a geriatrician, a rheumatologist, or your gynecologist, if they are willing to try to look for an underlying cause for why you are experiencing the bone loss. One of the first things to do is to really evaluate your lifestyle. So look at what you're eating, making sure that you're exercising, and I'll talk a little bit more about what type of exercise to do in just a second. Avoiding smoking and making sure that you're not drinking too much alcohol is very important. And you want to eat foods that are rich in calcium and vitamin D, such as dairy products, leafy greens, and fortified foods. But you may need to work with a registered dietitian to develop a plan that makes sure that you're getting the right types of vitamins and minerals to strengthen your bones. So I think a lot of times people know if they have a crappy diet, or they might think they have a great diet. But if you break a bone and get your DEXA scan done, that might be a good time to work with a dietitian or your other providers to really look at your diet to see how much calcium and vitamin D you're actually getting. The next thing you can do is supplements. Another thing I've discovered on this journey is that not all supplements are equal. In fact, there are a lot of crappy supplements out there. I was probably on one and just didn't know, because when someone tells you take a multivitamin and you just go grab a multivitamin, it might not have enough vitamin D and calcium in it. If you aren't able to get enough calcium and vitamin D from your diet, these are two supplements that you can take along with magnesium. But it's important to take these as recommended by your doctor, because you could have other chronic conditions that impair your ability to absorb and use calcium and vitamin D. The third thing to do is to look at exercise, what type of exercise you're doing. So engaging in weight-bearing exercises like walking, jogging, those are the things that everybody is told to do. But what I've actually found out in the past couple of months is that strength training is actually a critical component of this to build and maintain your bone density. And even if your bones are already weak, exercising can help to make them stronger and prevent falls. And the other side of that is doing balance and strength training, because both of those things are important, not only to strengthen your body overall, but also to improve your balance and your flexibility to prevent falls. So you may need to work with a physical therapist. You could hire a personal trainer, but work with someone to help develop a plan that's going to work best for you. The fourth thing is looking at fall prevention strategies. So make sure that your home is safer by removing tripping hazards, using non-slip mats, and ensuring that you have good lighting. Even lighting that comes on automatically with movement at night can be helpful to help prevent falls, because falls can contribute to you having another fracture. And then lastly, looking at medications. And with these, you really need to work with a provider to make sure they prescribe medications that help to strengthen your bones and prevent them from breaking if you were to progress to osteoporosis, or if your osteopenia doesn't improve after your initial DEXA scan. I actually recommend, at the moment someone tells you have osteopenia, or even if you are close to that marker for having osteopenia, at that point, you need to begin to think about the diet and the lifestyle things and the supplements that you can be taking to prevent requiring medications. So this is kind of where I'm at. But the major classes of medications are biphosphonates. These drugs slow down bone loss and they reduce your risk of fracture. What they do is they help the bones grab the calcium that's circulating in the blood and pull it back into the bone to help your bone to rebuild itself. The second class is hormone replacement therapy. So this could include estrogen for women, and I would recommend talking to your provider about bioidentical estrogen and progesterone rather than synthetic versions of these, because both can help maintain bone density if you are peri or post-menopausal. Selective estrogen receptor modulators, or SERMs. These mimic estrogen's bone protective effects without some of the risk associated with hormone replacement therapy. Then parathyroid hormone analogs is another category. And this is a synthetic form of parathyroid hormone. And it's used to control the distribution of phosphate and calcium in your body, and also stimulates bone growth. But again, this is where your provider is going to need to look at more than just your TSH. So if you have a fracture, your TSH is on the borderline of normal for either hyper or hypothyroidism, make sure that they do a much more in-depth assessment of your thyroid. And then the last thing is denosumab. And this medication helps to prevent bone loss by inhibiting a protein involved in breaking your bone down. So those are the different medications that you can take. But again, anything we can do to prevent or reverse bone loss is going to be important. And so I just wanted to share some of the resources that I found helpful as I've learned more about osteopenia, osteoporosis, the impact of menopause on our bones, the impact of thyroid issues on our bone. Had never even heard that you could repair and fix your thyroid, but that is something that can be done. Especially if you have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which actually is the most common autoimmune disorder out there. It's just ignored by a lot of people because it is so common. But the biggest things to do for that are to avoid gluten and dairy, and then work with your provider to correct any imbalances and make sure you're getting enough calcium, vitamin D, etc. And then I have 2 podcasts to share with you. The first one is by Kevin Ellis. He's also known as the Bone Coach. You can search the Bone Coach to listen on audio-only platforms. I listened to him on Apple Music. And the other one I found is Dr. Eric Bozansky. He has a podcast called Save My Thyroid. That's also on Apple Music. And both of those have been very good resources in helping me learn more about bone health and the role that thyroid plays in that. There are other resources out there, like OsteoStrong is another like exercise or business that has popped up around here locally, and I think it's like a national chain. But I would recommend starting with your local providers and also learning more if you've been diagnosed with osteopenia and osteoporosis about what those things mean and what steps you can be taking to improve your bone health. Like I said, I was not happy being told to just take my calcium and my vitamin D and come back in 2 years. I think that is bull crap. And I wanted to do more. So I'm just sharing some of the resources I found and that I trust on my own journey to build my bones back. And I guess I'll let you know in about a year how we're doing. So thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to go to my website, melissabphd.com/join and sign up to be an HYSU Insider or MVP member. You can also become a member on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to me on today. If you find this information helpful, please like it, leave a 5-star rating and a comment, or share it with someone that it might be beneficial for. And until next time, be well.